Hi, welcome to this week's episode of In the Hoods. This week we're going to be talking about East Harlem, which is differentiated from Harlem proper. This neighborhood runs from 96th Street to the south, for our purposes to the west to Madison Avenue, and all the way up to about 130th Street, where it hits the Harlem River. To the east, it runs along the East River into the Harlem River. It's really a very large neighborhood. Now, East Harlem is currently mainly called El Barrio, or Spanish Harlem, for its heavy Latino influence. Although in this century, in the 2000s, the neighborhood has become much more diverse. You have a lot of Latins still, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, people from El Salvador, people from Mexico, but you also have Chinese and anyone looking for more affordable housing. I think it was 2016, the New York Times dubbed it one of the hottest neighborhoods in New York. But I'm going to start talking about the early days in this neighborhood, which is something I really learned about. The neighborhood really didn't start developing as an urban area until the 1800s. It was very rural before then. And it wasn't until an elevated line for the subway came up this way. That happened about 1887. And in the early 1900s, when the IRT, the Lexington Avenue line, came up. And this is when apartment buildings began to be built, brownstones, some tenement buildings. The neighborhood has always been a very working class neighborhood. But the area originally was settled by German immigrants, Italian immigrants, and Irish immigrants. One thing that I found very interesting is that there was an area from about 96th Street to about 125th Street, from Lexington over to the East River, which used to be called Italian Harlem. And apparently there was a huge population of Italians in this neighborhood, which began when Italian labor was imported into this country to break a strike. These people settled on 106th Street all the way east. They built a little shanty town, and then this area expanded and developed into Italian Harlem. A number of gangs developed in Italian Harlem. There was an active criminal element in Italian Harlem. It is really the birthplace of the American mafia, which I did not know. The Genovese family got their start in Italian Harlem. And apparently the Italians were largely responsible for the early drug trade in Italian Harlem. At the same time, the Little Italy downtown was being developed, but it wasn't really called Little Italy. This area was called Little Italy. And although the number of Italians, the ratio of Italians to other ethnicities was never quite as large in this area as it was downtown, the number of Italians in this neighborhood was much greater at one point. It really wasn't until the 1970s that the influx of Hispanics came. And at this point, many of the Italians had moved to the Bronx, they'd moved to Westchester, they'd moved to Long Island, and the gap was filled with Puerto Ricans immigrating to this country. And that's where the term El Barrio comes from, which last week we talked about the El Barrio Museum on Fifth Avenue. This neighborhood is frequently called Spanish Harlem and or El Barrio. Although there are a huge number of Hispanics in this area, probably the greatest number in any neighborhood in New York City, it isn't the whole population. This is also a neighborhood which has the second largest number of public housing buildings, next to Brownsville in Brooklyn. Brooklyn beats this neighborhood out. So there's a lot of poverty in this neighborhood with attendant crime. It's a tough place. It's a neighborhood where I used to, in my preteens, go to buy firecrackers. Do you remember those firecrackers you threw on the sidewalk and they'd explode? I forget what they were called, but that's what I used to buy on 103rd Street and probably about Lexington Avenue. I think I was probably all of 12 years old when I did that, a long, long time ago. But this is a vital area in New York, and because the prices for real estate were lower, developers have moved in, and there are some new developments here, some new smaller condominium buildings, more affordable. Everybody's looking for affordable housing, and that is one of the truths of New York, which remains for all neighborhoods.